Just going to do a brief roll call real quick. We will have Councilmember Branstetter, Councilmember Lauricella,
Here.
Councilmember Lindholm,
Here.
Councilmember Pearson,
Here.
Councilmember Talbot,
Here.
and Deputy Mayor Bell and Mayor Boki are excused for this meeting. Council members, please move and second to have a council member serve as a presiding officer due to the absence of mayor and deputy mayor.
I'll move to have Councilmember Lauricella chair the meeting.
Second.
You have a quorum. Okay.
Does it? Okay. So the motion's been moved and seconded. So all those in favor of Councilmember Lauricella chairing the meeting? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. There you go.
Thank you, Councilmember Pearson. We'll just take a moment while I switch to another seat and then we'll get rolling. All right, well, I will call this meeting of Monday, July 20th, 2026 to order. We've had our roll call, which I appreciate, and now we will conduct the Pledge of Allegiance to our nation's flag. So please rise and join me. I, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. All right, so next up we have our proclamations and presentations, which we have none of this evening, and then we'll go right into public comments. So public comments are accepted by mail, email, or live virtual or in-person comment. Send comments in advance by mail or email to Brianna Schumacher, City Clerk at 6000 Main Street Southwest, Lakewood, Washington 98499, or bschumacher@cityoflakewood.us. Comments received up to 1 hour before the meeting have been provided to the City Council electronically. The clerk will read the names of those who have submitted comments in advance.
There were no public comments submitted in advance for this meeting.
Thank you. Members of the audience may comment on items relating to any matter related to city business under the public comments period. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. If you would like to provide live virtual public comments, you need to join the Zoom meeting as an attendee by telephone dialing 1-253-215-8782 and enter meeting ID 868-7263-2373, or visit zoom.us and enter meeting ID 868-7263-2373. Upon entering the meeting, please enter your name, use the raise hand feature to be called upon. For those participating by calling in by telephone, to use the raise hand feature, press *9 on your phone. When you are unmuted, please provide your name and city of residence. Each speaker will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Outside of public comments, all attendees on Zoom will continue to have the ability to virtually raise your hand for the duration of the meeting. You will not be acknowledged and your microphone will remain muted except for when you are called upon. So first, we're going to start with those who are on Zoom or phone who have raised their virtual hand to speak. Do we have any virtual hands raised?
We do. We have a total of 4.
All right, let's start at the top with Judith.
Hi, I wasn't going to come because you're so discouraging. You don't listen to the people that actually show up to your meetings and make an effort to participate in their own government. And it's like, why should I bother? But I care about the people and the plants and the animals, and we are not getting help from the federal government. They think that the climate change is a hoax, but it's trickling down to you guys. And you act like climate change is a hoax, but you've got a poisoned lake and you're cutting trees down and pouring concrete. And I have no idea what to say to wake you up that we are running out of time to do something about it. What could anybody say? There's one person on your city council who wants to at least change part of your road measure so you could save the trees. And okay, here's what it says. The others, you guys, refused to ask the city manager to even put it in the Oak discussion. Why do you deserve to be city councilors? What is it that you thought that you would be doing? Being in charge, bossing people around, cutting trees, making people rich off of cutting down non-ill trees? What is with you? You ran to be a public servant, and all you want to do is be a boss and cruel. You are not doing what you told those kids that you were going to do. You are dooming them, and you know it. You need to stop with your redevelopment stuff and your stupid sidewalk enlarging, and you're covering everything in Lakewood with concrete and tearing down all the shade. You're fools. You're fools. Either that or you're intentionally cruel. I'm done.
All right, thank you, Judith. Next up, we have Linda Smith. Linda? Linda, are you there? We still can't hear you. All right, we'll come back to Linda. The next hand raised says Ken's iPhone. Please state your name and city of residence for the record.
Hello, I live in Tacoma. My great grandkids live in Lakewood. I'm talking about Lockburn Lane Road. It's right off of Stellicum next to Burrs. It's a unique road that kind of like it funnels down to a very skinny road for about 75 to 100 feet. The sidewalks on each side at that point in the road are a foot to foot and a half above the street. And there's parking on one side and there's one lane of traffic. And the speed limit is 25 miles an hour. I was sitting in my car one day waiting to get out, go get the grandkids. And a car went by me at 18 miles an hour. I know that because you used to have a speed thing up on the sign. And when it went by me, I said, wow, that guy's ripping by me. I thought it'd be going 30. 18 wasn't even the speed limit, and it was an outrageous speed. In Tacoma, there are lots of roads where the speed limit is 20 miles an hour, and parking on each side, and 3 cars could drive down the road at the same exact time. They're so wide. This road is skinny. The speed limit is too high. Somebody needs to sit in their car and have somebody else drive by them at 25 miles an hour at the skinniest place. And you'll instantly realize speed limit is too high at that point in the road. one of those old style 2-foot speed bumps would make everybody slow up to 10 miles an hour, or change the speed limit. I spoke on this. Somebody actually should do something. It's an outrageous speed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Let's go to Tikamir Dunlop next.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello, my name is Tikamir Dunlop, and I'd like to make a comment about the Dower Elementary School Oaks. In particular, why the question of why even discussing the options for redesigning the sidewalk around the trees, as Laura Cella suggested, was rejected from the agenda. There are 3 trees with 4 trunks, each somewhere between 150 and 300 years old. There are many members of the community that strongly oppose the current sidewalk project plan. And the city council don't even have it as an agenda item. I've said this before in previous public comments, but I really can't comprehend the disconnect of how we treat trees compared to other historic landmarks. Obviously, we don't have any 300-year-old buildings in Lakewood, but one can imagine that if we did, and let's suppose hypothetically there's a project to demolish a 300-year-old historical landmark house to build a sidewalk, people would be very upset. Yet you can't even discuss the question of maybe somehow redesigning the sidewalk plan to go around the trees. It just doesn't make any sense. You know, I forgot how the expression goes, but you know, people say words are cheap, but you can't even do the cheapest thing, which is talk about it. And it's just like, I don't know. I mean, if you cut them down, you know, 50 years from now, nobody's going to care about whether or not it took a couple extra hours to discuss the question. But 50 years from now, those trees are going to be gone. And even if one planted replacements, they're going to be still tiny because Gary Oaks take a really long time to grow. So I don't know. It just seems really stupid to me and really disappointing that the lowest bar is talking about it, discussing it, you know, and you can't even do that. So it's just disappointing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dunlop. Let's go back to Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith, we still can't quite hear you. Looks like you're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Good evening, Mayor, not Mayor, council members. My name is Linda Smith, President and CEO of the Lakewood Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber is here tonight in support of the businesses along the Custer Road corridor. Let me begin by acknowledging the obvious. We understand this project is necessary. Roads eventually need to be rebuilt, and we appreciate the city's long-term investment in infrastructure and public safety. At the same time, we also recognize that for the businesses located along this corridor, this project represents more than an inconvenience. It represents months of uncertainty, lost customer traffic, disrupted deliveries, and the possibility of significant financial hardship. After reviewing information from both the city and the affected businesses, it's clear that there is not disagreement about whether the project should happen. The concern is how it will be implemented. Several business owners continue to express uncertainty about construction timing, customer access, traffic flow, detours, and how they are expected to operate during the closure. While the city has provided updates and outreach, it is evident that many businesses still don't feel like they have the information needed to confidently plan for the months ahead. Our request is to ensure the businesses who have invested in this corridor are treated as true partners throughout the entire process. We respectfully ask the council and staff to continue meeting directly with affected businesses before construction begins. We also ask that you finalize and clearly communicate access plans, detours, and construction schedules as soon as possible. Also, explore every reasonable opportunity to shorten the duration of the closure, including incentives or scheduling options that could safely accelerate construction. And finally, to maintain regular communication throughout the project and respond quickly as issues arise. These businesses are employers, taxpayers, and longtime members of our community. They understand progress sometimes requires a temporary disruption. They simply want the opportunity to survive the construction so they can continue serving the Lakewood area long after the project is complete. Infrastructure improvements should strengthen a business district, not unintentionally weaken it. The Lakewood Chamber appreciates the city's willingness to listen, and we look forward to working collaboratively to help make this project successful for everyone involved. Success won't simply be measured by a newly paved road. It will also be measured by whether the businesses along that road are still thriving when the ribbon is cut.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Thank you.
Are there any additional hands raised?
They are not.
Thank you, Ms. Clerk. We will now shift to folks who are in chambers with us. I have a list with a couple of people on it, but that should not prevent others from being able to speak. So we'll start at the top with Mr. Paul Bryce.
Paul Bryce, reside Lakewood City. Thank you, council members. I want to talk about cannabis. Kind of a long day for me. Last night was soccer. Had some drinks with some friends and maybe one too many, so kind of a R&R, but as being a 50-year-old adult male, you know, a lot of people believe having a scotch at the end of the day or for whatever reason, that's simply fine, even though that's a toxin. So I'm feeling a little bit today because obviously had a couple drinks yesterday, but wanted to come in here to discuss why cannabis should be legal. A lot of people believe 58% of the people around our country, all for the AI says they all use cannabis at some point in time in their life. You know, that's a big majority. You know, the whole reason why it's even going up for vote is the fact that we know how popular it is and how many people actually do consume. You know, often I hear, you know, to get things to go in council, bring more people in here that, you know, also agree. It seems kind of silly to have to bring people into an event here where we know already how many people are already consuming and using cannabis. Last week, you know, I attended the planning council meeting. And, you know, I have to say, it does kind of feel like a lot of gatekeeping. One of the planning councils was a doctor, and she brought up how in predisposed genetics that cannabis could cause schizophrenia in children. And it just seems, you know, odd that still we keep bringing up that this is not for children, but yet, you know, after all these years, if that's the only thing that we're kind of finding, there's so many arguments medically that where it's for epilepsy, pain, and so many other reasons, not to mention just recreational, like a scotch at the end of the night, it should be allowed for adults because this is for adults use. Then also heard, you know, Lakewood, we haven't had it approved and there's nothing wrong with it. Well, I think you could say the same about like, you know, get rid of the banks and the liquor stores. People need to use them. Like there's, clearly Lakewood's not going to fall apart if you got rid of the banks, it'll still survive. But, you know, for economy and everything else, it makes sense. These businesses should be treated really no different than any other retail business. And then, you know, then you hear about the buffer. I get not wanting to have it around schools or parks where kids will be all day, but entities like transit stations and other buffer zones where it's already hard because there's so many places, if we do approve it, you would think Lakewood just, with the planning department, find out where its best uses to bring people in for economy and everything else, that would actually make sense and maybe consider a cap on the amount of stores. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bryce. Next up on the list is Kathy Tart.
Good evening, council members and fellow citizens. I'd like to read my comments if that's okay. My husband and I have lived in Lakewood, Kathy Tart. My husband and I have lived in Lakewood nearly our entire lives and have lived in our current home for more than 33 years. Until last year, our neighborhood across from Edgewater Park was a quiet, safe place to live. Since the house across the street was demolished to expand the park, however, the quality of life for the surrounding residents has changed dramatically. The increase in park use has brought a significant increase in noise, litter, drug and alcohol use, public urination, and other disruptive behavior. During warm weather, both sides of our street are lined with unlawfully parked vehicles, often leaving only enough room for a single car to pass. At times, vehicles are doubly parked or illegally parked in front of fire hydrants, creating serious safety concerns and potentially delaying emergency responders. Traffic conditions have also become hazardous as drivers frequently make illegal U-turns in the middle of the street, often without regard for oncoming traffic or pedestrians. Our neighborhood is home to residents who walk their dogs, parents pushing strollers, seniors using walkers, and individuals in wheelchairs who regularly visit the lake. It's only a matter of time before someone is seriously injured if these dangerous conditions continue. We've made a real effort to address these issues respectfully. We often speak with park visitors, and while many have been courteous and understanding, others have responded with profanity, hostility, and even lewd behavior. We've also contacted the Lakewood Police Department numerous times. We understand that officers are often responding to higher priority emergencies and that staffing is limited. So we appreciate the occasions when officers have been able to respond quickly and restore order. But the recurring problems require a more proactive approach. Another concern is that people continue to use the park after closing hours. It's common to find vehicles parked illegally after the park is closed, with occupants drinking, using drugs, playing loud music, and leaving trash behind despite the availability of garbage cans throughout the park. When we've pointed out that the park is closed, nearly everyone has told us that they never saw the posted hours, which is understandable because the current sign is approximately the size of a sheet of paper with small white lettering on a dark background, making it difficult to notice or even read unless you're standing directly in front of it. We respectfully ask the city to consider several practical solutions that would greatly improve safety and quality of life for both residents and park visitors. Number one, install a large reflective sign clearly displaying park hours. Number two, install a clearly visible no U-turn sign to discourage dangerous traffic maneuvers.
Ms.
No.
Tart, I'm going to have to cut you off here at 3 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
But
Okay,
if you have information to share with the city, feel free to send it
Okay.
across.
certainly. Can I just leave this with you? Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, that is the end of the folks who are signed up, but others are welcome to queue up behind the podium and speak for their 3 minutes.
Hello. Hi, I'm Haley Ivy, and I want to piggyback off of what our community members had said about Edgewater Park. I actually, after talking about how overgrown and trashy it had gotten, I went a couple weeks ago, and it was the grass was mowed, and I didn't notice as much garbage in the water's edge. I don't know if somebody answered a prayer and got that garbage off the water's edge. I don't know, but I didn't see it there. And I was relieved. I shed a few tears, as I do almost every time I visit Edgewater Park, because when I visit, now that I can hang out there and it feels nicer, there's less tree canopy, and times are a lot hotter. Not only just in the world because of climate change, but also because of the overdevelopment and the pavement all over the place. And I say this as somebody who does not have a car. I commute by bus. A lot of my commute is by walking, which is fine. I love walking outside, but I have to be the first to notice when the canopy's gone. I have to be the first to notice when there's trash. Also, a lot of the lights around here do not let pedestrians go first. And so going back to Edgewater Park, I just don't understand why any city chooses to make changes to a place for the greater good of development in places where people are living, where it affects them, and we're the last to know. And so when it comes to Edgewater Park, there hasn't been the pavement development yet. There's just been those trees cut off for the swimming beach, which it's really hot there now. But when it gets really busy, when it's a really hot day, there are huge boat trailers, there are huge trucks, there is noise, there is trash, there is smoke, there is the smell of pee. Yes, this is a beautiful, tiny, tiny little nature's park for the people who have lived there forever. There are trees that have been cut down over, or I hear 16 trees cut in the last 3 years at Edgewater Park. I just can't imagine it. So my point is, if I'm walking around and I have nowhere to land, it's all pavement. There's no real nature for me to go to locally. We all have to drive to it. So what is there left for people that live in their own neighborhoods, that now I have to watch the park that helped me discover myself when I moved here, because it was the only nature place I had access to. And so if I'm having to come there on the hottest days and there are people who are not from the neighborhood, huge boat trailers, huge trucks, a bad attitude, and I love everybody. I try to love everybody, but I don't even want to go there. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go to Silly Lake. It looks terrible. Less development and more education for the environment, and somebody on the panel to please listen to the environmentalists. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Ivy. All right, next up.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I apologize. I thought the time was 7 and so did some others. So may end up getting some comments posed. I do have a couple of maps if you can share those with them. Corey Campbell, Class C Chassis, Lakewood, and also a resident of Lakewood. I just want to follow up from our talk from council meeting 2 weeks ago. And first of all, thank the council for hearing many of us and trying to work with city staff and planning and city staff, also trying to respond and help us where possible. I do want to convey, though, that there is still no cohesive update. There is no detailed specific plans that have been shared or discussed. There's been no meeting with the business owners. While the economic manager and communications manager have tried to lean in and give some assistance and start kind of catching up where, frankly, the project should have been months and months ago from a communication standpoint, that is just starting, and it's lagging and it's inaccurate. You'll see by the city's 2 maps, there's contradictory information on them. Both of them show Custer Road closed with no crossover traffic from north to south. Economic and communications also understood that to be the case when they spoke with the project engineer, as was told to me back 2 months ago, that no, they would assure that there is cross access at least occasionally. How do I answer the communications director when he asks how many hours and what hours will you be open when our staff doesn't even know if they'll have jobs, and we don't know what hours we should be open because we don't even know whether we have cross traffic access to our facilities. And there's other businesses that can't even get access if there's no access through that. So we were told there will be cross traffic access. We don't know that. The maps don't show that. And the communication hasn't been there to know that. We were told 45 days in late March, early April. Then it was 60 days. The map shows October 31st, potentially. Which is it? Which is it, City of Lakewood? It's not okay for a magnitude project like this when we have employees, 50, 70 employees just on our one site, who don't know their future in 3 weeks. They don't know. How do we schedule? How do we plan? If you, the council, could not sign off on checks for the budget because you don't have a plan, how would you feel? How would you address that if you didn't know whether you have the funds and a plan and a schedule that's detailed out? What would you do? I implore shifting some of your traffic funds. You guys have secondary traffic funds that have been set aside for other projects and other purposes. I am imploring the city staff and planning to meet with the contractor and come up with a secondary contract to push for extra days of work and extra hours.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell.
I also implore you to listen to the chamber's input. Thank you.
Hello, my name is James Dunlop. I'm a resident of Lakewood. I don't see why neither the mayor nor the deputy mayor shouldn't be able to turn up. I mean, after all, the previous mayor was able to attend meetings from his hotel room in Paris, even if it was 4 a.m. So, you know, what is the problem here? Now, as far as the trees are concerned, we've been talking about the trees here for a long time, since I think 2021. We've gone on and on about it, and we kind of got the impression that the city council had some appreciation for the problem, particularly in terms of Gary Oaks, these irreplaceable plants, which are host to a very complex ecosystem that take several hundred years to reach maturity. And you know, the whole point of talking to the city council, for example, having an ad hoc tree committee is perhaps to educate the city. I mean, the city and the city councils talk a lot about educating the public, but I think here the public have perhaps, we hoped, been able to educate the city. And you know, there is also a question of practicality. You know, ordinary citizens cannot possibly monitor what the city is doing, you know, what they're developing, what they're planning. You hope that the city, if it goes to the trouble of creating an ad hoc tree committee, for example, will start to create a culture whereby trees are protected, where you don't just cut down a couple of Gary Oak trees just because you're building a sidewalk. There's a sense of trust. You trust the city to do the right thing. You trust the city to say, okay, we want to do a sidewalk if that was really necessary. What are we going to do to protect these trees? Yeah, there is that question of trust. And so looking at the last city council meeting, you know, the view was nothing could be done. Absolutely nothing could be done because it's already planned. Okay, it was already planned. Why was it already planned? Without any conception of the value of the Gary Oaks. We thought, well, all of this discussion, all of this effort, and you know, having the Gary Oak as the city tree, you would have thought something would have sunk in, but it would seem that all this talk about nature and trees and climate change and disparity in terms of 7 degrees Fahrenheit difference and so forth, it seems to mean nothing, absolutely nothing at all. It's just words. And so the question is, how can one possibly trust the city? Because the city, it seems, on the basis of what we saw at the last council meeting, couldn't care less about Gary Oaks and other trees.
Thank you, Mr. Dunlop.
Hello, good afternoon to all of you and all of those who are present. My name is Ibrahim Mir Jalili. I'm a resident of the city of Lakewood. I understand that the tree on John Dower Street seemed like, even though it has been brought to the attention of the council, still the plan is to have it removed. I wanted to ask and urge you to reconsider that, especially now that more city council members are present to maybe discuss it. You know, speaking of environment, I come from an area that is arid. Not all of Iran is like that, but I remember when I was a child, there is a mountain that is like a sleeping lion. It's called actually by that name. And I could see the whole year was full of snow. And now you go in March and there is no snow anymore. That means that whatever we have done to this earth, or maybe naturally has happened, I doubt it, it has changed our universe. It's no longer what it is, yet we expect it to sustain our life. No mom can give milk to her kid if cannot drink and cannot eat. We better have some conscience and take care of what we have. Please look at this and see if you can do something about this tree. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Merchalili.
Hello? So you should tell people that they're not audible, right? If nobody can hear here, it's not good. We should be able to hear the people who are talking. Christina Minetti, I've lived here since 1972, as I've mentioned before, and what we witnessed at the end of the last council meeting was really disturbing. When Mr. Russell asked whether discussion about how to save the John Dower Oaks should be put on the agenda for today, the mayor shot it down. He said the thing was done, that it had to be brought up by a council member. He repeated, it had to be brought up by a council member. Then, of course, nobody spoke up. Some of you weren't there, but nobody spoke up. They couldn't even speak up to have a discussion about how to save the John Dower Oaks, even though they knew that one of their colleagues wanted to have that discussion very much. Now, what kind of collegiality is that? They couldn't even bother to have a discussion. It didn't mean that you'd have to save the oaks. Like, okay, you can like cut it down anyway, but you could talk about it because you know what? Obviously, people forgot about the science that says that those oaks are supposed to be saved. And that's what's supposed to guide the city policy about Gary Oaks. If in a SEPA checklist, something is left out and this is discovered, or there is new information about the project, oops, did I do something? Did I touch something? Maybe, what did I do? Then they have to, can you fix this please so I can continue?
We'll pause your time.
I'm sorry, I don't know what I did. No, it's okay. I think maybe I hit something over here. You're good. Is it okay now? Yeah. Is it better? Okay. Tell me if I'm too loud. Okay, I'll try to be quiet. So anyway, if you're on a SEPA checklist, something's left out, either maybe intentionally, unintentionally. If something new is discovered, then you have to do it again. But the city doesn't have to follow anything because it's in the public right of way. They can do whatever they want. They don't even have to follow the tree regulations in the city. I don't think they even need a permit, right? And the engineer, Mr. Pokrzywinski, told me they don't even consult an arborist anymore because they think they are too, they're concerned about liability. So how can it really be done if the council hasn't even examined whether a different redesign could preserve the trees? How can it be done if new information, better alternatives haven't even been properly considered? The city should protect the trees in the public right of way because those are in its own jurisdiction. They can say, oh, private property, we can't do anything about it, but why aren't they protecting the ones in the public right of way? So I ask that you allow Mr. Councilmember Lauricella's discussion to take place. Now that he's here and he can speak up, it's not very nice to bowl something over when there are people who are absent. And it's certainly not very democratic. So please remember that these oaks are to be saved and that you are not saving them yet. So the second comment is from the Gary Oak Coalition, Lakewood. And one of our supporters, a native of Lakewood from an old established family who cares very deeply about these oaks, has very generously donated a copy of Professor Douglas Tallamy's book, New York Times bestseller, The Nature of Oaks, for each of you. You'll hear directly from her, I'm sure, but for now, I want to give you So Professor Ptolemy also wrote a letter. Is there anybody? No, everybody got one. He also wrote a letter. I'll give you a copy of it and also a copy of his CV. I'll leave it at City Hall along with the books for whoever's not here. He writes, he's at University of Delaware. He's an entomologist who is extremely interested in oaks, as you see from that book. He says, I'm writing in defense of Lakewood's Gary oak population and its associated habitat that continues to be under threat as a result of the City of Lakewood's policies. This evening, you will receive copies of my 2021 book, The Nature of Oaks. Before you begin reading, I would like to say a few words that might help you better understand Gary oaks in general and their plight in Lakewood. Having been a research scientist for 45 years, I'm currently the T.A. Baker Professor of Agriculture at the Department of Entomology, et cetera. I'm going to just make excerpts. The area of focus for the past 25 years has been plant-insect interactions and their implications for the conservation of biodiversity. I'm particularly interested in native North American oaks as keystone species, supporting entire guilds of other species, more so than any other genus of trees. He says that he explores this in the book that you were just given. He says to remember that when a keystone species is removed from a food web, the food web collapses and its associated biodiversity disappears. This is not only happening within ecosystems and worldwide, but also in North America, which has lost 3 billion breeding birds in the last 50 years and 22% of its butterflies in the year 2000, since the year 2000. These losses are not trivial from a human perspective because they are the species that run the ecosystems that provide life support for humans. Cutting down those John Dower oaks would lead to a number of deleterious outcomes. A large number of species would be destroyed, the habitat would be destroyed. Those oaks support 185 caterpillar species. They would lose, he says, you'll lose tree canopy, obviously, and you should question the methods that are being used to determine whether Gary oaks should be protected and preserved. I will give a copy of this to you. He says, I would argue that every surviving oak of the original Gary oak habitat should be afforded at least the maximum protection that the guidelines suggest, and preferably more. He has said elsewhere that everyone should be protected. So, right. So anyway, I will give you a copy of the letter and the CV, and thank you very much for your time.
I have to learn how to use this mic. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak for public comment? Seeing none, I will declare public comment closed. All right. Next up, our consent agenda. City Clerk, could you please read the consent agenda into the record?
A, approval of minutes of the City Council meeting of July 6, 2026. B, approval of the minutes of the City Council meeting of July 13th, 2026. C, motion number 2026-50, authorizing the execution of an interlocal agreement with Pierce County for on-call building inspection services. D, motion number 2026-51, authorizing the execution of an amendment to the agreement with Graham Baba Architects in the amount of $177,243 for updated design, bidding, and other support services for the H-Barn redevelopment. E, motion number 2026-52, authorizing the execution of an agreement with McDonald Miller in the amount of $75,177 for energy planning, reporting, and monitoring associated with the State Clean Building Act compliance. F, motion number 2026-53, accepting a grant from the Washington State Department of Commerce Defense Community Compatibility Account, DCCA, in the amount of $873,000 for the North Clear Zone project demolition of the Tactical Taylor Building. G, motion number 2026-54, accepting a grant from the Office of Public Defense in the amount of $5,000 for public defense services. H, items filed in the Office of the City Clerk. 1, Lakewood's Promise Advisory Board meeting minutes of February 5th, 2026. 2, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting of April 28th, 2026. 3, Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting of May 26, 2026.
Thank you, Ms. Atkins. Are there any items that a council member wishes to remove from the consent agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion and a second on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? All right, consent agenda is passed. We now move on to the regular agenda. Unfinished business and new business from the city manager. Is there any? All right, next items for discussion. First, a review of the second quarter police report and fireworks calls for service. And for this, we're going to call on Chief Patrick Smith to join us. Thank you for joining us, Chief Smith. Looks like we have our quarterly stats up if you'd like to speak to them.
This.
Okay.
All right, good evening. I'll go over the Lakewood Police Quarterly Reports for the second quarter for the police department. So in the second quarter, our quarterly report shows that we have a sorry about that. A 5.6% reduction in our calls for service. Give me 1 second. Okay, that's fine. All right. Okay. 5.6% reduction in our calls for service over the second quarter, which is kind of consistent with the past second quarters of the past 3 years. And we would just remain in that area or zone as far as our calls for service are concerned. But we do show a reduction in calls for service during this time frame. Our arrests are down in all areas, considering which is consistent with our calls for service and normal arrests. Our past report shows that we have been down in calls for service and other things over the past 3 years. And so we're kind of balancing out as to where we are. We show a 22% reduction in gross misdemeanors, 14% reduction in misdemeanors, 20% reduction in warrants, and an overall reduction of 13.4%. Our crimes against persons, we show our ag assaults are still going down, and we're down to 23% over this time frame. Our civil assaults are up 5.3%. During this time frame, we show one homicide, and one homicide is related to domestic relationship, whereas a 2-year-old child was lost during this incident, and we're still waiting for the outcome. Therefore, we show an NA there. Right now, our robberies are down 4.5%, and our sex crimes are down 2.2%, for overall reduction in our crimes against persons for this quarter, down 1.7%. Our crimes against property, our burglaries are down 6.9%, fraud 25%. Our larcenies are down 28.4%. During this time frame, our motor vehicle thefts went up 11.2%. As you know, we've been offline for this time frame during as the laws change related to our flock cameras, and hopefully we'll back up soon. Our stolen property is down 52.5%. Vandalism is down 16%. And our weapons violations are down 11%. And our crimes against property as total is down 21.7%. In this area of pursuits and eludes, we're finally getting back into our normal mode as before the law changed. We show another reduction of 13.3% in our pursuits and a 3% reduction in our eludes. And the graph shows that you'll see that we're back down as far as the comparisons are concerned. And our yearly comparisons, we're also down. Our shots fired in the community were up 10% during this time frame. And overall, as comparison is slightly up from on our quarterly review as well. And also from our first quarter to second quarter. Our motor vehicle thefts, this is just a graph showing our motor vehicle thefts. As you know, we've come a long way in that area, and we're down to 99. Our collisions were down 8% during this time frame. We've managed to show significant progress in traffic collisions as they are showing down in all areas. Our first quarter to second quarter, 7%, and our second quarter comparison is 5%, and our end of year, or I shouldn't say end of year, our year to date is down 8%. And this is our overall crime summary going up and down the line. I'm sorry, I didn't bring the dailies, which would show other reductions across, but it had not been updated. So these are our final numbers for the second quarter of this year. Before I move on to our fireworks and calls for service, are there any questions for me in these areas?
Fellow members of council, any questions for the chief? Councilmember Talbot?
Thank you, Chief Smith. On the slide of collisions, could I ask if there is any time and effort dedicated in the force to kind of look under the hood at these collisions and do some comparison as to the causes, or at least what's involved, whether, for example, whether or not collisions involve a DUI or anyone under an influence versus potentially distracted driving or just speeding?
So the significant cause of traffic collisions in the city of Lakewood is going to be related to speed. However, our traffic unit analyzes all the traffics and have everything broken down as relates to traffic data. I don't have that here this evening, just the quarterly report, but we do have those numbers.
Any other questions for Chief Smith? All right. The fireworks report.
So here's just the basic numbers for our calls for service during the July 1st through the 6th, which is usually when the time frame that we have the most calls for service related to fireworks. And you can see the comparison. We kind of stretched this one out from 2017 to 2026, so you can have a longer view of the comparison. So we're pretty much in line with most years, but in others we're down, depend on the day of the week that you are reviewing. But for the most part, our calls for service remain somewhat steady, I would say. There were no real issues related. And these are the calls for service for the police department and the fire department during this time frame. And it goes from July 1st to July 6th, related, calls for service related to either fireworks or shots fired or something related, depending on what the person determined during that time frame or was calling for. And that's all we have for those. And that just gives the analysis showing the shots fired, calls for service, the fireworks calls, and as well as the dispositions of how the calls were broken down. Any questions related to the fireworks?
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? Councilmember Brandstetter.
Yes, Chief, thanks for assembling the data. I guess going back to 2017 to currently, why is it that there have been 0 citations every year?
So I can only answer from 2023 until now. Typically during this time frame, officers allow, some give some allowances for folks to use fireworks during this time frame so that folks are able to enjoy the holiday season. And most of it is done, the follow-up enforcement is done by warning, advisement, and things of that nature, as long as people will comply with the directions of the officers, then they do not issue a citation. And that has been the historical nature of the departments, I guess, since 2017.
And what is the protocol for having a call for service disposition be canceled?
So a lot of times, and it kind of goes to the nature of the citations, a lot of times people will call for the police to respond, and officers will respond, and folks have done their fireworks and they're gone by the time officers arrive. And your question was the protocol for, can you repeat the last part, sir?
I'm not sure that I understand it. So how does canceled differ from unfounded? Very, very few are found unfounded, meaning to me that most of them indicate that someone was setting off fireworks.
So if an officer responds to the scene where they indicate fireworks or something was going on and there's absolutely nothing there, there's no indication that something was amiss, then it can be unfounded. Canceling is when the citizen called back and cancel the call if the person is gone, if they're no longer doing it, whatever they were doing and the police had not been there, then they will cancel the call.
So for the 2024, 25, and 26, which is when South 911 started the online reporting potential. The number of online reports and the number of canceled dispositions is identical in each of those years.
Okay.
which seems to indicate that are encouraging people to make online reports doesn't really get anything other than a statistic.
Well, it depends. If someone can make an online report, officers can still respond, or they can cancel the call because the online report has been completed. If it is a report-only call and there's no reason for officers to respond, then it will be canceled due to an online report being taken. Most of the online reports are during the time frame, whereas the city allows for fireworks such and so forth to go on or within the window. And so if someone is reporting it and they're reporting it during that time frame, then it is an online report and it will be canceled. And you're correct in that they are one and the same for the most part. And so they are canceling those calls, whereas the service is no longer needed by an officer to respond to take a report.
So what is the impact or the value to citizens in Lakewood as we encourage them to make online reports, which essentially are reports that either because it takes so long for an online report to process through the system that it doesn't do anything in terms of getting a response to something. Why should we continue to have an emphasis on online reporting to the public if that's not something that actually promotes enforcement safety? I mean, it looks like the online report is a placebo to a person who perceives a problem.
Well, that's one way to look at it, but we still want to keep the statistics of what's occurring. If they end the online reporting, then in those instances, the officers will still respond to those calls. They will not be canceled. They will be delayed in going to another higher priority call. And so
I guess that I would accept that would be the case often, but not always. Which seems to be is that it just seems that we have got a practice of canceling whenever become aware of an online report, either because we don't become aware of it in real time or something else. But it seems that when we are telling the community that online reporting is a viable way to have some controls over fireworks and to get a response rather than having to call and have a phone call to do that. But it really doesn't generate any real activity in response to what is being reported. I guess why should we continue the policy of encouraging online reports?
Well, so that we still know exactly what's going on. If we end the online reporting, then in many instances, officers will still respond to that location, and many instances will take a report in person if that caller still desires. Or we can continue the online reporting and they can go on to other higher priority calls. We already know that the fireworks are going to be in play during this time frame. We have numerous stands in the community for people to purchase fireworks during this time frame.
I guess so. Did the online reports um, are they evaluated statistically so that even though we didn't do any real time, it shows up as canceled? But do we maintain data as to locations and that so that we know where people were concerned enough to call?
If I may speak on this for
Yes,
a
sir.
moment, Chief. So as many of you know, in my day job, I work for South Sound 911. I do a lot of data gathering and analytics specifically related to the online reporting and fireworksreport.com through my team. The intent is that this serves as the non-emergency reporting for fireworks, which is why you wouldn't see an emergency response from our police officers on this on a normal basis during this time frame. To speak to the usage of the reports after the fact, they are maintained and used for data analytics to determine. We've shared information after the fact with municipalities, cities, counties, et cetera, to help drive their decision making around fireworks regulations, where the hotspots are for additional patrols, and that sort of thing. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Yes, and on top of that, the council part is telling you that this has been broadcast to the officers, so they still in the field of their patrol, can still go by that location, they can still check the location, they still have the information, except the call was canceled and it was handled online or reported online or referred to the online reporting during that time frame.
If the council were to move forward with a comprehensive ban on fireworks in the city, would you project that this chart would change, that we'd actually see some citations being issued?
I think the chart would change in a number of ways because we would probably end up having more calls for service during this time frame, more responses, and you would probably see the citation part change and some of the other fields change as well. Because now there's a mechanism for enforcement. Right now we have a window of time to whereas the city allows for fireworks, it also allows for the sale of fireworks in the city. And so that changes the level of enforcement that is administered by officers in the city. And so oftentimes, and with that, oftentimes is not the letter of the law, it's the spirit of the law, in that when officers can provide warnings and advice and things of that nature, then they have the ability to use their discretion.
Okay, and I just have two more questions about the data that we're gathering.
Yes, sir.
On this chart, there's a column for shots fired calls for service. Is that not necessarily fireworks related?
Okay, shots fired, calls for service during that time frame. So your question is that
is this fireworks related, or is it strictly the standard definition of shots fired? Like you have another slide.
so that's a standard definition. So it could be some form of fireworks that sound as if it's shots fired, or it could be shots fired. There are people who will fire their handgun in the air or something like that during this time frame. And so those are the reports that we received this year. There were 5 of them. But if absent evidence, there's no way that we would know during this time frame because there's so many fireworks.
Okay, and then what is not on this slide is that there is not a column that reflects injuries or property damage.
That would be the fire department. Injuries would be the fire department, and property damage would be a totally separate area for us.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember Brandstetter. Are there any other questions for the chief in relation to the fireworks report? All right, I will just have one note. I see overall numbers are reduced from previous years. I'm guessing that's a result of the cooler and wetter weather we had leading up to the 4th.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chief.
All right, thank you.
All right, next up, we will talk about the downtown transportation feasibility study, status update, and preliminary alternatives. And for this, we'll have Assistant Director of Planning and Public Works, Angie Silva.
Thank you, council members. Tonight is a progress check-in as it relates to the downtown transportation feasibility study. So just a friendly reminder, kind of the focus is downtown sub-area plan, as this is not a citywide effort. We are planning for transportation for all modes of travel and safety focus. So specifically looking at crash data, pedestrian bicycle gaps, ADA accessibility, and evaluation of a number of projects identified in the sub-area plan. This is an implementation study, not a restart. So intent here is to build off of many voices as part of the original adoption of the sub-area plan back in 2018, but also its most recent update in 2024. And work towards an actionable implementation strategy for transportation projects in the downtown core to pursue funding efforts. So before we go into the online survey results, I'm going to just share where we are in progress. So kind of baseline data collection has been substantially complete. So that's looking at crash information as well as traffic counts collected within the downtown area. We are embarking on the start of alternatives development. So what we'll be covering tonight is kind of bookends or themes on what those alternatives could look like for future study as well as future community outreach. Phase 3, once we complete that effort, there will be a preferred alternative, meaning different ideas and concepts make that preferred alternative, where we'll further analyze the cost of that, in terms of planning level cost estimates, do some 30% design renderings, as well as wrap up an element of this study, which is a local road safety plan, as well as implementation and strategy. So kind of we're right smack dab right in summer fall efforts on the overall timeline as we march towards a final deliverable, a final report by spring, hopefully early spring 2027. So on the survey results, big key takeaway items, the survey was hosted for a 3-week period. We got 205 responses with 1,225 safety pins on the map, meaning folks were able to identify in the downtown area where our safety concerns and what those are. We also received 133 written comments, as well as the survey was offered in 5 different languages. In addition to English, 4 languages in addition to English. So respondents' demographics, roughly about 2/3 are between the ages of 25 to 64. Over half, about 54%, come to the downtown for shopping. So I'm just doing the big headliners, but you can see the breakout of that data on your screen and in your packet. So additional survey results here, top safety concerns as it relates to all driver behavior, so failure to lead, about 45%, aggressive reckless driving, about 38%, speeding, 35%, and distracted driving, about 32%. Top investment priorities that were identified in the survey were physical design for safer intersections and crossings, about 56%, wider and improved sidewalks, 44%, reduced traffic and better flow, 43%, street lighting, about 35%. In terms of requested improvements through the survey, respondents desired pairing design along with enforcement. So roadway designs and signals, about 49%, improved pedestrian and cycling facilities, 47%, improved crosswalks, 36%, but also patrols, 36%. So what can I take away? This is just not asking for more enforcement. They're asking for better designed streets that make the unsafe behavior harder to do. Moving on, some more survey results. So the gap by mode, and when I say mode, we're talking about vehicular, we're talking about people who walk and ride cycles, but also use transit facilities. 95% drive downtown and largely feel fine doing it. But 46% feel unsafe walking and 79% feel unsafe biking. What this is kind of saying, downtown works if I'm in a car, but if you need to walk or I'm on a bike, there is definitely a gap in that perception of safety. Continuing on, pedestrian amenities requested, about 63% desired improved lighting. Rapid flashing beacons, again, this is for pedestrian crossings, 57%. Additional outdoor seating, 54%, as well as bus shelters, 35%. As it relates to bicycle facilities, 55% wanted separated or shared use paths, not paint next to traffic or what you see signs around the downtown that says share the road, or we call sharos for short. Those preferences directly relate to how we craft kind of those bookends and those alternatives that I'm going to go into shortly. Now we'll head into kind of just some preliminary crash data. So we were able to collect crash data citywide, but also focus on the downtown, which is this study's focus. So 578 crashes in the study area occurred in the last 5 years, which is roughly about 9% of that citywide total, a little over 6,700. 3 were fatal crashes, as well as 7 suspended serious injury crashes in the downtown in the last 5 years. While you see the trend of annual crash counts declining, but the severity remains. As we look towards kind of solutions and countermeasures, what we're seeing is kind of top crash type entering at an angle at intersections, about 24%. Followed by rear end crashes, about 36, that's the combined total there. And then sideswipe, about 14%. The fatal crashes involved impairment and roadway departure. So for example, hitting a signal pole, light pole, or running off the road. These point to speed management, intersection design, and also roadside treatment. The framework you see on kind of the top right there, that green image, is really the safe system approach. The intent here is to look at safer roads, speeds, vehicles, road users, and post-crash care. So this helps guide the development of countermeasures that we look at in the alternatives, but also in the local road safety plan to select for both the study, but also future endeavors down the road. So as it relates to the bookends, so again, why do we do the bookends? These are intended to be broad themes of testing different concepts and ideas so we can rate the pros and cons, but also analyze those with data. So for example, the purpose is to really analyze the trade-offs between them side by side, the safety benefit, for example, the cost, right-of-way impacts, tree impacts, access, equity, and even the consistency with the sub-area plan. Once we analyze those alternatives, part of the scope of work is to do additional outreach, get the community feedback on that. There will be an online open house coupled with an in-person open house to help refine that input. And once that's completed, I will be coming back to council and providing that information, but also to select that preferred alternative. So part of the alternatives really look at kind of different bookends on that safety focus, Greenleaf Street focus, as well as that. And part of your packet information really defines those bookends, but also some initial questions to get some feedback and make sure that we incorporate that early on in this process. And just one of those questions is, do the concepts or the alternative bookends reflected in your packet, is there any ideas that we're missing that need to be incorporated? Are there any particular outcomes or concerns missing as part of it? But also any guidance on downtown access and circulation, such as the Green Street Loop. Is there something we need to specifically analyze? As well as private roadway connections. So a good portion of that Green Street Loop goes through private property. That increases overall right-of-way costs. Is there another alignment we should be considering, or just general feedback. And just that alternative A, again, this is intended to be kind of the idea behind this one, safety first, focuses on reducing speed, increasing pedestrian safety, and improving ADA accessibility. Also looking at improved sidewalks with a number of different countermeasures associated with that, but also looking at, reducing vehicle speeds through design. Alternative 2 or B, looking at a different bookend. So incorporating that multimodal green loop street that's in the downtown subarea plan. And the intent of that is to have a protective bike facility, wider sidewalks, and traffic calming. Prioritize improvements, so improvements focused on existing public streets versus acquiring right-of-way. And lastly, kind of that safety, connectivity, and vibrancy, opportunity to create kind of a distinct trail with art and amenities that serves as not only the Green Street Loop, but also that wayfinding and placemaking element envisioned for the downtown. And here's just a cross section. This is illustrative purposes and some images on what those concepts could look like. And then alternative C, kind of that max end of that bookend. Test different concepts, again, between alternative A and B. Still looking at that multimodal Green Street Loop, but maybe in a different way. So same concepts, protected bike facilities, wider sidewalks, but maybe a different alignment. Next, street connections, acquisition of private roads and construction through routes to create better connectivity for all modes. And then again, investing in downtown. When I say investing downtown, this means kind of a ramped up number of capital projects and safety improvements throughout the downtown core, which by default will increase the overall cost of this particular option to analyze. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions this council may have at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Silva. Members of council? Yeah, Councilmember Lindholm.
Thank you for this presentation. It would appear from the map that we're not including the Colonial Center in the Green Street Loop. Is that right?
That's part of the alignment you see. Which alternative, sir?
I was looking at the alternative B map.
Yes, part of this is testing different alignments for that Green Street Loop. So this would be a different concept.
Can it be part of the discussion to include or connect with the?
Yes, absolutely. The one thing I would encourage this council, when we look at the alternatives, test different ideas. If they all have the same alignment, you don't get this trade-off analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? Councilmember Branstetter.
On one of your slides where you talked about what cyclists wanted, and you lumped together dedicated bicycle things and shared use. And I guess that I hear from the community a significant difference in the way those two are viewed. That there are folks that don't trust shared use roads as actually safe places to bike. And in a lot of times over past history, we created shared use roads because there was some provision in a funding that we were seeking for a roadway project that asked to say that it needed to include amenities for cyclists. And so that was one that you could do. But our shared use system is discontinuous. We have bike lanes, and then we go to a block or something of shared use, and then we go to the road evolves into something that is neither, and that goes on off. So I would guess to say that in any of those concepts, I would try to differentiate between those two, and as you focus more on community input. If there really is a general dissatisfaction as regard to safety on shared use, to not prioritize that solely to say we're doing something when it's not convincing to people. The other thing that I guess that I would ask you to do is, that is not mentioned in your presentation, is that if are there opportunities within the downtown or the expanded downtown, as this study has got, because it extends all the way over to I-5 on the east, of where there is be some benefit to identifying some roads that could be redesignated as for one-way traffic. That might do that. That would create a loop to do that and promote some safety. And also, are there any blocks or street segments that perhaps could be closed to motorized traffic to be able to go and do that? For instance, does Motor Avenue have to continue to be through the plaza, continue to be a vehicle thoroughfare? It has parking at either end for folks that want to participate something, but it's an area that I guess I would look at saying that having some pedestrian-only routes at various places in the downtown might serve some needs beyond safety, but be something that would go on. So I would include that in at least a couple of the alternatives to see, are there opportunities for that?
Thank you, Councilmember. Motor Ave definitely has been on the radar for non-motorized. Are there any specific roadways in the downtown core we should be looking at, for example, on the one-way traffic concepts, or what you've heard from the community specifically there?
Well, I guess that I would look at Bristol, and it's not a public road. Okay, it's going on there. It's a private road that's there for much of its length, being able to go and do that. But it could be set up that way that that's when it comes apart. When we were first looking at the downtown plan, and there were ideas about doing different things with Bristol, and then ultimately we decided that it didn't have great value as a thoroughfare, that it's primarily because on both sides of it, the businesses on it have their backs to it, and it's primarily a road used for deliveries. But it could be something that doesn't have to be a through fare for all types of traffic to be able to go and do that, and could even be one way with some to be able to do that. And it might even be have some other opportunities. I think there's some segments of that are outside the town center, but in the downtown. As we look at that, there's going to be some redevelopment on Lakewood Drive from Sealy Lake Park to the entrance to the downtown, and that it's the type of redevelopment that'll lend itself to greater pedestrian traffic. Take that into consideration.
Thank you.
Other comments? Councilmember Pearson.
Thank you, Councilmember Lohr. So thank you for the presentation, and I'm going to take a little different spin on this. I agree with Mr. Brandzetter's comments. I also like the idea of connecting in the plaza area. And my kind of question, I guess, for staff is, as we're thinking about the Green Street Loop, this to me is like a downtown circulation plan. Like, we're just moving people around in the downtown that are already in the downtown. But how do we get more people interested in going to the downtown? And I think that where I would really like to see, and I know that the Green Street Loop project can't expand, outside of the downtown plan area, but I would really like to see Bridgeport be a major part of what we're thinking about when we're talking about, you could use the term Green Street Loop kind of as what we're trying to accomplish here, but that could mean a lot of things. But one of the really key elements for me is bringing people into the downtown and not just circulating folks that we have in the downtown, just circulating them, right? Like, how are we bringing people in? How are we welcoming people in? When you look at the arterials in Lakewood, Stillicum is like the busiest arterial. South Tacoma Way is the second, and then Bridgeport's the third. But those other two arterials they serve like totally different purposes. So Stillicum is like heavily for people getting in and out of Lakewood, commuting. You're not going to the downtown. You're getting, you're going home to and from work and doing things like that. South Tacoma Way on the edge of the city, a lot of industrial, commercial traffic and people, on and off of the freeway. It kind of serves another different purpose. But Bridgeport is really like the main artery that serves the downtown. And so when I think about the Green Street Loop, it's a great project. I don't want to, think it's a bad project, but I wouldn't spend any time focusing on the private roads in the downtown, in the Green Street Loop. I would be expanding it to all of the public roads. I think that if we can get more people coming into the downtown, I think that we'll have the folks like, the alliances coming in and redeveloping things. And, when you look at what's going on at the Tacoma Mall, right? They made a whole new village area because they have the need for it. And they're bringing people into the mall and like, they're doing their own improvements to create that feel and that circulation that those users want. So that would be my kind of, and also, as we're thinking about the Green Street Loop and connecting to the downtown, not prioritizing like level of service, like how do we get people in and out of the city as fast as possible, but like how do we make that experience as enjoyable as possible and, as inviting as possible. And, Bridgeport's really the front door to the city, and people spend a lot of time focusing on curb appeal and their front door when they design a house. And so, what is our front door going to look like, and how are we going to be inviting people in? So that would be, as I look to expand the Green Street Loop, most of my focus would be along the Bridgeport corridor and getting to the Bridgeport corridor and out to the highway and vice versa, bringing people in.
The only limitation of looking Bridgeport as a whole, only a portion of that falls within the downtown study. So just keep that in mind. We can focus on that, understand the broader systematic needs for that thoroughfare as well as gateway to the city and the downtown. Just what we can focus on this would be the downtown core only. But thank you, sir.
All right, Councilmember Talbot.
Thank you, Ms. Silva, for the update. Can you help me understand? I just want to make sure the takeaway that I got from this presentation and from the staff report a little bit seemed to imply that if there is any one preference in any of the alternatives, then does that mean that the study going forward won't consider the non-preferred alternatives?
Part of the scope of work, there will be a number of analyses done on this, but when we start zeroing in on cost estimation, the 3D kind of renderings of what that at 30%, we are looking at kind of that preferred alternative. Let's rein it in and spend a little bit more time and energy on what that would look like. Part of the pros and cons, yes, there will be some preliminary information as part of all three of them as part of the open house, but really zero in on it at the preferred.
Yeah, thank you. And I asked that question because I think at this point, my take on this is that it's a bit premature for us to even kind of lean towards a preference on any of these alternatives in any one right, because there's a lot of unanswered, I mean, there's a lot to explore in each alternative itself. Like on alternative A, which is the safety-driven focus, I think that we still need to see maps of those high crash locations, and we need to understand from the local road safety plan what the identified crash risk factors are. It looks like you kind of went into them on the safety slide, indicating that, angle crashes are a high percentage, and that is typically the case with other cities too. But that's an important consideration for us to understand and know those locations, because that usually indicates that a high percentage of angle crashes usually leads to a higher fatality rate.
Yep.
And what are the kind of impetus and causes of that? Sure, we could assume speed, but is it road geometry? So that's why I'm getting at, I just think that we still need to see more, we need to see those maps and that analysis further. And we also need to understand the countermeasures that are being proposed.
I don't disagree with the council member. Tonight wasn't intended for council to select their preference over one alternative or one idea of an alternative or another. We're at the early stages of defining what that bookend is to study further and to bring that data and that analysis back to you as well as the community for additional feedback. So what I'm hoping to get out of tonight is, are there specific items we need to be factoring in those bookends as we continue this effort?
Yeah, so I guess my first kind of request or suggestion there would be, we need to see the local road safety analysis to understand if we're going to make investments in safety, what exactly are we in for? And then on alternative B, yeah, I agree with, Councilmember Lindholm's question is on point. When we consider the Green Street Loop, but also the circulation in, throughout, and to and from downtown outward, you have all, the crossing experience across Bridgeport and across Gravelly Lake. That's huge, especially considering the number of apartments that you have on the east side of Bridgeport and the density of residents that you have on the west side of Gravelly Lake. And so that convergence zone at Gravelly Lake and Bridgeport, that intersection, that's like the largest intersection, spatially speaking, in this, in our downtown. So I just want to make sure that we need to ensure that how we're encouraging circulation to from the Colonial Center, or between the Colonial Center and the rest of downtown, also that we're cognizant and making it easier for crossing those two major thoroughfares. And even further south of the Green Street Loop, crossing Gravelly Lake at Wildair and at 112th, those are key intersections in this study as well. And then street lighting, part of the survey, it looked like one of the biggest percentages for desired street amenities included street lighting. We do have, when I was looking at Google Street View, we do have street lighting on Bridgeport and Gravelly Lake, but we just don't have head scale street lighting. We don't, I think 112th is like the only proximate street in the downtown that has any ped scale lighting. And even the rendering in this presentation, the cross sections don't even feature ped scale street lighting. So if we're going to want to encourage and promote an inviting space, you know, those amenities we're going to have to rethink and strategize how to best fit in those, you know, amenities like street lighting. I think the last comment I have is on alternative C. Just again, kind of trying to drive the point that that circulation to, from, throughout downtown and then outward is not just, I guess I just don't consider it merely the blue lines on this slide. I consider it all the streets throughout the gray shaded downtown that is scoped in the scope of work. I mean, we really should be looking at the friendliness to cross all the major arterials at every end and intersection of the downtown. 108th, for example, is a key street to me that passes in front of a school. And also a lot of the high schoolers walk to downtown, and that's their back entrance, their back door. Those are key. There are key roadways in downtown that and intersections that I think just need to be reconsidered in what we consider the network of alternative C. Those are my comments. The last questions I have are two questions. Number one, is the survey closed and will it remain open for a longer period of time? And then also, have we conducted a steering group? It sounded like there was a steering group that was going to happen in the public engagement phase. And for any businesses, residents, or others that are just chomping at the bit to be part of the steering group, when and how can they be part of that?
Yep. So the survey concluded after 3 weeks, so it is closed. We're not envisioning another round of survey as we work towards the alternatives. Part of the public participation plan that I brought forward to this body, when it came to the alternatives, we were envisioning a different method, which was more of an open house online style where you can pinpoint on the map what features you like, provide feedback, but also in-person opportunity as well. As it relates to the task force, you are correct. There are 3 different task force envisioned for developer real estate folks, to business and property owners, to those who are users of some mode of travel within downtown. As part of my outreach to various service groups, I've been asking people to bring forward their names if they'd like to participate. I do have one individual from one of those that did step up, but also a couple as it relates to the real estate community, et cetera. We are looking probably September or late August, early September to start those meetings specifically. But if there are specific members you know that are interested, and I promise I will use their time wisely. This is supposed to be focused agenda, specific feedback, but also here's some additional data. What's your reaction? Are we on the right path? We're hoping to start that in mid to late August. So again, send me any names or folks that are interested, please reach out and we'll accommodate.
All right, thank you, Ms. Silva. Some more feedback. So as I look at the alternatives that are presented, it looks like they just scale accordingly. So B includes A, C includes B and A. I see this as going from a tactical solve what's directly in front of us in terms of safety at one end to a long-term strategy. How do we bring everybody in at the other end? And I really appreciate what Councilmember Pearson mentioned about finding ways for connectivity to Bridgeport and extending that further, and understanding that's not part of our Green Street Loop plan as it is, and it's not all part of our current downtown definition. but it is how people get there. And I think it's especially important to look at it as that connectivity piece. And I believe there's probably more opportunities for outside funding for state and federal grants if we look at how it connects to I-5, as well as Bridgeport goes on to JBLM. And there may be opportunities to work with our federal partners to improve that access to our downtown core. I appreciate what all the other fellow council members brought forward, making sure it includes our Colonial Plaza. I think study information on whether some one-way streets or pedestrian-only areas make sense. And I think there are experts in the field that can guide us on that. So I'd be curious about that. And then I also appreciate what council members Lindholm and Talbot brought forward. And I think from my perspective, I lean more towards the long-term strategy of how we bring everybody in. But at the same time, we have to deal with the safety issues that are here today and have solutions for those sooner. Yeah, Councilmember Pearson.
Thank you. I'll get back to kind of answering the specific question. So I got a little sidetracked, but it was well pointed. So as far as the alternatives today, again, I'm not really supportive of option C as a whole with improving, showing a bunch of improvements on a bunch of private roads that are throughout the town center. I think that where I would prefer option C to go is staying on public right-of-ways and improving the public right-of-ways, and then hoping that we get enough promotion of folks into the town center and redevelopment in the town center that they want to go ahead and do any future improvements to, improve the circulation on their properties, to make that a better, customer experience. But I don't think that we need to be the ones going out on that. So Main Street and 59th through the middle of the town center there, I would leave out Lakewood Town Center Boulevard cutting through the town center, plus a couple of the other kind of side cut throughs, and the ones that go around the side of the movie theater or the new development and Target. I would leave those all out on option 3. And then on option 2, and I guess I would say on option 2 and 3, I would be highly supportive of including the QFC, wrapping around the QFC property there on 93rd, and not just making it like an actual loop, but almost having a couple of do loops up there in the north part of it to connect that all. So wrapping the QFC along 93rd and then coming down the west side on Whitman, coming back out to Mount Tahoma Drive, and then also going, all the way along Mount Tahoma Drive out to Bridgeport up to the Gravelly Lake intersection. So really that all of those kind of public streets up there on the north side, I would include all of that in the webbing of the Green Street Loop as that, as we look to promote, that area of the city and connect it. So I would have both of those as something that I would like to see on option 2 and 3. And I would say the differentiation, kind of weird, but to differentiate between options 2 and 3, for me anyway, would be kind of option 3 is more focused around what to do around the town center, but maybe both of the options include the plaza and that whole kind of area. So
Thank you. I'm very grateful this is recorded so I can go back to your notes there.
I would agree with Councilmember Pearson that I think to focus on our public rights of way and not private streets at this point. I also like the idea of expanding to the north end of that QFC property. So I would say even Bridgeport to 93rd, then 93rd across down to Whitman, back over to Gravelly, and then completing that, as we talked before, all the way down to 112th by the high school. But I also think in order to move faster to address safety concerns, a phased approach might be the way we need to go about it. And maybe it's the plan is long-term, but our implementation is phased so that we can be more successful. Councilmember Tabla, did you have something?
Yeah, I think I was just gonna, I just wanted to back into my previous comments, and it was my, it was my kind of assumption, or I guess it would be my desire to see that when we develop street standards and cross-section standards, that we're really developing them for the length of the skeleton of downtown. So I was following as best as I could Councilmember Pearson's limits, but but overall, I mean, from 112th, you know, from the southern end of downtown to the northern end of downtown on Gravelly Lake, and then even cross section standards applicable to like 100th and Main and 108th, but essentially the type of the amenities that we need that give the look and feel. So, thank you.
Say it. I think, you know, listening to the conversation, and I understand that we're thinking that our grant to do some of this restricts us to the downtown sub-area as we have defined it. But I think that we have heard that in addition to that, we want to take a look at those corridors that bring people into the downtown and extend them a little bit more away from the center. And that would include taking a look at some of the design standards for Bridgeport all the way from I-5 into the downtown to at least Lakewood Town Center Boulevard, or perhaps all the way to the intersection with Gravelly Lake. But would also take a look at 108th Street or whatever, you know, because that is a way that a lot of people get from wherever they are into the downtown, and decide on how far to the south on Gravelly Lake Drive is actually an entry corridor. And then also to take a look at the work that we're going to be doing on Mount Tahoma, that is essentially designed to be an entry corridor. We kind of thought about Ardmore in that range when we did that work a couple of years ago. And so I think that works well. And so I think while we're concerned about the area here, I think we need to be concerned in this study and in developing alternatives are also on the corridors that bring people here, not just alternatives for what happens when they are here.
I hear you loud and clear. This came up during contract execution and the desire to expand outside of the study area. Hear you loud and clear that desire. That really needs to be developed separately out of this effort. This is not a refundable, reimbursable action by this grant. And if we wanted to rescope this, that means I start back at the federal level and I work my way down to the state. If I do that, that will take a lot of time, and there's no guarantee that this money will still be there. So I just want to keep that on the radar. But with that said, this body has separate budget processes as well as efforts to queue up some of this effort. And I encourage to keep that on the radar, keep it on the radar of the staff. But right now, deliverables with this have to focus on the downtown area.
Well, and I guess I understand that, but I would also say in 3 months, we're going to be working on the next biennial budget. And so having some non-grant funds in that biennial budget to supplement the work of the grant to consider particularly the corridors. I think it would allow things to progress together.
Understood, sir.
Thank you, fellow council members. I understand what Ms. Silva is saying, right? We have a specific scope around what currently is funded, and to go beyond that requires a sort of reset. And from my perspective, it's how do we execute on what's currently scoped, but keeping in mind a longer, larger idea of where we want to go to have that future compatibility with what we do. And that's the hard part is recognizing where we want to go and how to keep this in that direction without going opposite ways. So that's why our city staff is here and they're good at what they do. So anything else for Ms. Silva? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next topic is a review of the automated traffic safety camera program. And for this, we'll have City Attorney Heidi Wachter and Captain Pete Johnson joining us.
Do you have the map on for the screen? Oh, well, let's put that on. Okay. It might not be in there. Good evening, Council Chair for the evening, Laura Sella, and members of the council, Heidi Wachter, City Attorney. At the beginning of the memo, you will see that we have briefed you several times on this. We've also briefed the Public Safety Advisory Committee, and they've given us some feedback. I still have the map where they indicated the dots. I will tell you that for the most part, there was general support for the idea of camera enforcement in the city of Lakewood. When we brought that information to you, other questions arose, and they were questions along the lines of where is the intersection, if you will, between speed, collisions, things of that nature. So you've got a variety of charts in front of you. You've got the PSAC feedback as far as their recommendations for schools and parks separately. You have school zone potential citations per month by location, and that's for schools and parks again. And then the third set of charts that you have, one for school and one for parks, indicates the total traffic volume on the 3-day traffic count. And then the percentage that's on there is the percentage of total accidents at these cumulative locations. So in other words, where it says 20% for Clover Park High School, that's 20% of the accidents that occur within all of the locations listed there. It's not throughout the city. It's just for the accidents that we were tracking. And you'll see in the footnotes there's indicated what the collision per vehicle trip is. The ones for schools are accurate. The ones for parks, I think I must have been using the wrong numbers, but I've gone back to revise. And what I will tell you is I can give you the specific numbers, but in order of which ones rank what way. Fort Steilacoom Park is number 1, Kiwanis number 2, Wards Lake number 3, Sealy number 4, and the Blueberry Park number 5. Fort Steilacoom Park at number 1 is 0.5019. And then Blueberry Park, I'm not sure where I wrote that number, but it comes in after Sealy Park, which is 6 zeros and a 19. So those are the correct numbers, and I apologize. It looks like what happened was I was reading from the wrong column. We had source documentation from Barra Mobility that did the 3-day traffic study, and they have a multiple of columns which include potential violations and total traffic. And so I must have been looking at the wrong ones. But you can see for each of those, Fort Steilacoom Park, of the accidents happening in those locations, 65% are happening there. The current state of the authorizing legislation still wants 25% after 4 years to go to the state Cooper-Jones Transportation Act. And that's money that I would assume as a city you won't see. If we see it, that would be a nice surprise, but assume that you won't. The remainder of the money can be used to cover the program and it can be used to do road work within the city. One of the things I was reminded of today by the city manager was that in order to take next steps towards locating cameras in the city, we would have to provide the necessary reporting that has to do with equity of location and things of that nature. We would be looking at how other cities have done that and replicating that to one degree or another. So this, I believe, is our third trip to the city council with this since the council started considering this is an option. And we have our own captain, Pete Johnson here, who has much more expertise with the actual on the ground of how this works. So either one of us are here willing, ready, able to answer any questions the council may have.
Thank you, Ms. Wachter. Real quick clarification on one of the things you just brought up. That 25% that goes back to the state after 4 years, is that prior to or after the program costs for the city?
After program costs, yes. And so in any event, the any revenue made by the program can be first applied to the program costs. And here program costs includes when the tickets go to court, when the tickets are reviewed by the person who reviews them before they go to court, camera maintenance, whatever it is, all of that is included.
Thank you. I will open the floor to my fellow council members for questions for Ms. Wachter or Captain Johnson. All right, Councilmember Pearson.
I don't have any questions. Thank you for the presentation. I will say that I generally support expanding the program, but I think that it really needs to be focused on decisions based on safety and not so much on speed. So speed is an element of it, but it's not the whole story. Like there's a lot of things, the Audubon, it's the safest, like one of the safest roads in the world. People go incredibly fast, but some of the more dangerous roads are slower traffic speeds, but you have so many, random things that can occur. You have people pulling out of a million different driveways and pedestrians around and kids and, so those are the elements that I would focus on when we're targeting where do we want to reduce issues at. Is for me, it's where are people walking and where do we want people to be walking and feel safe. So the downtown is a huge part of that, and schools in the downtown are a huge part of that. Senior centers and senior communities are a big part of that. People walking to and from the library and to City Hall and things like these are the areas that we really want to encourage people to feel safe and be safe walking, along with schools and stuff. So I know that like Port Silicon kind of keeps coming up as like an area that it ranks high on speed and high on some collisions, but I wonder, like, it's also, as I said earlier, it's one of the busiest roads in the city. So that's expected that there's going to be the most accidents or collisions on that road. But what are the chances of, pedestrian versus vehicle collisions, which are horrible collisions, versus other types of, vehicle on vehicle incidents? Those are not ideal, obviously, either, but they're less, risk when it comes to different types of collisions. So, that's really, I think, where I would be focused on this. And I don't want to view this as a revenue program. I think that if, like, at the end of the day, if every driver obeyed the traffic laws and we had no incidents and no tickets that were coming in, like, that would be a great success of the program, right? So it's not about generating revenue. I think that if we're generating a ton of revenue, that's telling a story, but it's not the whole story. And there's clearly significantly more work to do if, it's not solving the problem. So I don't want it to be like, let's just put these out here and forget about them. Like, when we put them out there, I want to keep figuring out, okay, are these things doing what we wanted them to do? Are they not doing what we wanted them to do? Did they work well enough that we can consider, is that problem solved, or can we take some engineering, street design things to help with some of this as we talk about the Green Street Loop and things like that, like not just keeping in mind our level of service, but also the pedestrian need and the safety elements of what we're doing. So I think that roundabouts and things like that have really helped increase our safety. The medians, I can speak from experience driving back and forth on Washington. When there was a two-way turn lane, and people comment often that I can't stand, I get stuck behind a bus or a trash truck, and that's true. It's, on Wednesdays or Thursdays or whatever trash day is, like, yeah, I'll probably try to go a different way, or something, or at least keep my eyes peeled so I don't get stuck behind one. But the other days of the week, I can't tell you how many times I'd be going 35, 40 miles an hour down Washington, and someone would come blazing through the two-way left turn lane. And that doesn't happen anymore because there's a median, right? And so, that single engineering design has solved that problem. So that's a non-issue anymore. So problem solved there. No speed cameras needed, and we solved it through engineering practices there. So that would be my comments on that. And when we think about, I really, it's hard to, I feel like we're all grappling with, is it speed? Is it, pedestrians? Is it proximity to schools or this or that? And I really would like us to come up with like one weighted score that could kind of like, we could agree upon, and it could really kind of tell the story with different weights and stuff that might be a better programmatic approach to deal with some of this stuff, rather than like, well, I think that this, is a issue here, or this is an issue here. What are the issues and how do we score them? And then let's like figure out where it's similar to the street ends, right? We came up with a scoring matrix on that and things like that. So I believe the last time we spoke, we were going to have 3, and one of my my 3 that I identified are the Cabrini or some route in between Bridgeport and the town center as a potential location. That would be one. Another one would be along Gravelly Lake Drive somewhere, library, city hall, active living center, the high school. There's a lot of pedestrian need there. Those 2 are really heavily focused on the downtown and where people want to be walking and where people are walking, not so much on speed. People aren't going incredibly fast in those areas, but there's a lot of people driving and there's a lot of people walking, and that creates a potential risk. So it's also been identified on the hit list, so to speak. So, and then the third one, I think, was one that Councilmember Brandstetter brought up last time was, I guess, really both ways, but on Stillicum near Four Heroes over there, either on Stillicum or Lakewood Drive is the other crossroad there. So that intersection would be another location that I would think would be well worth investigating and potentially citing some automated speed cameras. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Pearson. Yeah, Councilmember Lindholm.
Yeah, I think those are great thoughts. And I don't want to get personally too deep into where this should go. I want it to be data driven. I appreciate staff's input on this. I think if we are putting one on Stillicum, we might want to consider putting one near Lockburn. We've heard some testimony if there's concern about traffic activity there and speed there. Not to say we should, but it should be under consideration.
Thank you, Councilmember Lindholm. Councilmember Brandstetter?
Well, I do think that the automatic speed enforcement camera, expanding them in the city is a tool we should use. I'm skeptical about using the speed data as a key thing to do that because that feels too much like a revenue action as opposed to a safety action. That, and then the speed data for some of the locations that are near schools, the speed data is from 3 days in February, I think. And it doesn't talk about what was the speed, how much of that speed data took place when the speed limit was actually 20 miles an hour. And there isn't any way to get at that. They weren't designed to be able to go and do that. I think that I'm a little more comfortable with some eyeball tests of where there's potential problems and conflicts. And I agree with Councilmember Pearson. I do think that along Gravelly Lake Drive somewhere in the stretch of where that school zone is from Wildair up to 112, that it's also that high school students, I don't know that they have the same high school schedule that I had 50 years ago, but they all hours of the day, and that there are high school students out and walking and going and out of that. It's also an area that there is a lot of extracurricular things. It's close to do that, and it has. And I see a lot of people walking there and being able to go and do that. So I believe that is a prime area to look at. And I would also say that although John Dower has some good some scores that and it goes on all of that I think that's an area before we go in with speed cameras, we need to assess the safety improvements we make to that intersection and along that roadway to be able to go and do that, to sort of see where it goes. Elementary schools in Lakewood are not the danger points that they were in the community that I grew up in, of where elementary school students walk 7 or 8 blocks to school. We don't really look at having that. So, but the middle schools and high schools, such as Lockburn, okay, there's a lot of students that after school they walk somewhere, not necessarily directly home, but be able to go and do that. And my eyeball is this section of Lakewood Drive that is there that covers the adjacent to Clover Park Technical College, that Harrison Prep and Four Heroes, and is an area that I think is ripe for accidents or near accidents, and near accidents are just a flash away from being a serious accident, to be able to go and do that. So I would begin be saying that we should look using that mix of criteria, and as we start off initially to just look at three locations, so we can see how this works. Okay, and if we're thinking right, rather than deal with a lot of them, I think the area on Steilacoom Boulevard along Fort Steilacoom Park, I'm much more interested in evaluating that once we've got the new hospital in place and all that traffic and doing that than trying to go there now. It just, for the amount of traffic it has, it just doesn't seem that dangerous to me. The issue may be the speed limit is not, it it can stand a higher speed limit. It could stand a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit from far west to 87th. But again, I would like to think more along the line of Councilmember Pearson as we evaluate where these things are and take a look what we're doing.
Thank you, Councilmember Brandstetter. Councilmember Talbot.
Thank you. Yeah, I thank all my fellow council members for very thoughtful comments tonight on this. I approach it from a slightly different lens that we haven't talked about much, and that is I am supportive of expanding our camera program, but from the thoughts that I've heard tonight, we haven't talked much about the notion of rotating cameras and the fact that the law does allow us to rotate a package, a suite of cameras, if you will, around the city, which I think has its merits more so than just stationing them at chosen locations for no, for some fixed period of time. Rotating cameras, the practice, number one, is kind of a best practice that most cities are starting or trying to follow now under the Safe Streets for All paradigm. But also, it changes. You want to change. You need to get at addressing bad behavior. And so when you rotate cameras throughout the city, you can get to different locations while also people don't know they don't know where to necessarily, they change their behavior because they're not expecting them necessarily when they're, as opposed to when they're fixed, then you know that camera's going to be there, so you can just go speed on a different road. But what we haven't heard from is I guess if there's, I would like to hear a little bit more from staff as to what we've looked at as far as the options that we have before us for doing a rotating program.
You can do a rotating program. The only thing about surprising a driver is we're not actually allowed to surprise drivers. We do have to have signage. And so there would have to be signage wherever you put the cameras up. The signage is required to be up, I believe, 30 days before activation of the cameras. So I don't think it's against the law to have a sign and not have a camera. I think we could do that and just put signs wherever the rotating camera might end up being. But you definitely have to have signage up 30 days before you activate the camera in any given location.
Thank you. Yeah, because that gives us greater and broader flexibility to truly get at more problem areas over a period of time, as opposed to trying to kind of, decide at the forefront where is going to be the start of this. And we know that there are various locations all over the city. And as far as data-driven versus less data-driven, I think there is wisdom in accounting for data-driven analysis, because speed is, nationally speaking, the number of road-related fatalities and severe injuries that have gone up over the last 15 years have been speed-related. Speed is a contributing factor to deaths of 1/3 of all deaths and fatalities. So it's not negligible. You can't say that it's inconvenient to look at speed data. It has to be accounted for in some way. And even though our collision fatality, at least from the downtown statistics that we just saw, appears to be low, our angle crash rate is high. That indicates that, at least in the downtown, but probably representative in the rest of the city, angle crash rates indicate that as those numbers grow, the fatality and the severe injury rate grows. And I'm more concerned about trying to prevent deaths than anything else. I also think that, to Councilmember Pearson's point, encouraging and promoting and making areas safer for walkable spaces, absolutely. But I think we can also there's also remedies to get at that problem that don't necessarily involve cameras or camera enforcement, more involves the treatments of the streetscape and adding complete streets elements or even road dieting, which we haven't talked about much either. So those are my main point is I'd like to see a rotatable program.
Thank you, Councilmember Talbot and other fellow council members. So before this meeting, I did some data analysis. I tend to be a big data nerd and try and crunch things specifically tied to the speed data that was provided to us. And I put some weightings to that and built a spreadsheet. I shared it with fellow council members just based on speed data to come up with a prioritized list for that perspective. I appreciate that Councilmember Pearson started with saying this is 100% safety focused, not based on revenue. That is not our intent at all. I agree it would be a complete success if we launched up the program, there were no more speed violations in the city, everyone was safe, and we shut the program back down. That would be a success in my mind. I also recognize that speed is not the only factor. It's also where there are pedestrians and where there are people. So part of the rules and laws from the state are these have to be around parks and schools and hospitals. And I think that keeps us within that realm. I disagree that we need to limit ourselves to 3 as we start. I know several members of the council feel that's the way to go, but I think for a successful program, I think it needs to be bigger than that. And I think there's the opportunity to do that, measure it, see if it's successful, and then dial it back or expand it after we figure out what that number is. To me, it's somewhere around a half dozen sites, but again, that's a council decision, so I will go with the group after making my perspective shared. Our PSAC, our Public Safety Advisory Council, was clear in their main areas, and they agreed that in front of Fort Silicon Park is their #1 priority. And while the rate of accidents per million vehicles is lower than perhaps some other parts of the city, because of the sheer volume, addressing speeding issues there can have the biggest impact on a reduction in crime or in accidents. So with that, I would be open to adding weighting factors to volume of pedestrian data if we can get that for these locations and using that to help drive it. But I, like Councilmember Lindholm, want to make this a data-driven decision with sort of a checks and balances of an eyeball test, like Councilmember Brandstetter said. So I don't know if that provides any direction as a quorum for moving forward yet. What else?
Next question.
Yeah, Councilmember Lindholm.
Thank you. Is there a significant cost to rotating cameras? Just trying to include you, Captain.
I appreciate it. There is not. They're the same. That was factored in when we were working with the company. I do want to give a little clarification. As it was pointed out, we still would have to build out the infrastructure. They have to have a power source. They have to have signage before we can move them. And if you're picturing a towable item, it is not that. These are 900-pound plus items that the company would come in with multiple months' notice and rotate to a new location. So they are mobile, but it would still require every location where we want to have them mobile. We would have to plan out and put in the infrastructure to support it. Does that make sense?
Well,
No,
that
same
sounds like,
cost.
that
Same
sounds like there'd be a cost in some way.
No, I don't know off the top of my head the cost of moving them and what's included in our contract, but
Okay.
yeah, we can find out.
Would the costs of a program to rotate be included in the potential usable funding from this source? Can we use revenue from the camera program to pay for the moving of cameras?
I would assume that falls into the cost of ongoing maintenance of the program. So that would.
So
be
conceivably,
self-sustaining.
no matter where we scale this, the cost would be included by the program and the city would not incur additional costs ourselves.
Absolutely.
If we were not rotating cameras, would the contract be cheaper?
I can find out the information and get back to you. I'm not sure.
Contract matter if it's paid for by the contractor.
Well, it does, because we can possibly use that revenue for something else.
And the other thing we should add to that to find out is if rotating cameras is more expensive, it's true that the program will pay for it, but remember that whatever remains after you've paid for the program can be used for road improvements to enhance traffic safety in that way. So some of you mentioned things like medians and different engineering things that you can do with roadways. One of the ways we will be able to pay for that is through the program. So we'll check on what the actual expense is, but that's where the hit comes. It's not that it's more out of our general fund, but it's more that would impact that road money. And if you remember back to Troy Pot-Swinski from the Planning and Public Works Department, he told you that some of the roads that we're thinking of are roads that are not going to compete well for more grant money. We've really kind of gone to the well as much as we can with that. So there's a lot of moving parts and pieces there.
Thank you. And from my perspective, I would want revenues for this to pay just for the camera program itself. To me, as we start to expand for roadway improvements and that sort of thing tied to this, that feels more like revenue focused instead of safety focused. But I don't know how others feel about that.
Well, yeah, if I can just say, I appreciate that. I think if we're making roads safer, it's safety focused. Yeah.
Yeah, Councilmember Branstad.
Well, I guess that where I am at is that I'm thinking back more than a decade of when we first did some cameras, and there was we didn't roll it out real well, and we got a lot of criticism until people really got used to them, and that's a question to do this. That and we need to emphasize as we do this out to the community that both the fact that we're going to have additional cameras and where they are is got a safety focus reason behind it to be able to go and do that. It is for that reason that I'm opposed to having rotating cameras so that we would seem to be playing gotcha with people. Like, well, you went through it on a day when the camera was there, but it's not. You know, knowing myself, okay, and having gotten a couple of citations, one in Lakewood and one in Lacey, from these types of cameras being able to go and do that. But I know that my driving behavior changes at places where I know for certainty that there is a camera. For instance, I am very, very aware of a camera at San Francisco and Bridgeport, and at Phillips Road and Stelicum Boulevard, and being able to go and do that. I think that whatever number of initial cameras we do doesn't have to be a number that, like the last time we did it, has to last for a decade. It can grow, particularly as we find them to be the ways that they are adding value to safety, to be able to go and do that. So you know, I'm looking to moving forward, but that and the communications piece about the locations and that they're going to be there and the 30 days notice is just as important as the first citation that we're able to write with one of these.
Thank you, Councilmember Branstetter. I fully agree that a robust communications plan is going to be very important for this. Our vocal members of our community, I'm sure, will be very outspoken as something launches, because we often can be accused of trying to generate money to pay ourselves or to pay our city staff. And The intent for this is 100% safety. It's not to generate revenue to justify keeping people employed. That's not how we operate. So I think the communication strategy is critically important well in advance of 30 days. And as we come to a resolution on a strategy for this and how we're going to roll it out, communicating that from the beginning and along the steps as we go. So Councilmember Talbot.
Yeah, and along those lines, public engagement is a big piece of the Safe Streets for All paradigm, but also any Vision Zero plan. The discussions we've been having about cameras and even in the downtown discussion about safety, we're kind of, whether we know it or not, we are kind of teeing ourselves up towards the roll up of what amounts to strategies and what would be a Vision Zero plan. What is the city's direction? Where are we trajecting to do a Vision Zero plan anytime soon or far?
So we just went through goal setting process back in April, and that topic was not one that we were directed to move forward. If that's something council would want us to move forward at with, an overall implementation strategy, we certainly can, but that would be a discussion for this body to provide direction to us.
Yeah, I think that we had a lot on our plate at council retreat. I give us all that, but 2027, depending on the federal reauthorization of the IIJA bill, there may be a call for projects, just depending on the funding levels. And if that's the case, I do think that we should go after an SS4A grant, because that federal funding, although it is federal and has a lot of purse strings attached to all of that, it has been, all of it from its going back to 2016 has been undersubscribed. So we should take advantage of going for a grant for those funds to get that plan completed that will allow us, that will give us the teeth that we need for the equity analysis and also the public engagement that we're talking about now.
Thank you, Councilmember Talbot. I think thank you to the city manager for sending out our goals from our retreat. And as we revisit those and sort of polish them into what we need, that could certainly be a subset of the public safety overarching goals that we've set. So one thing I do want to note is I appreciate that speed isn't the only factor when it comes to public safety, but it is the thing that's easiest for us to measure through this type of program. We don't have distracted driving cameras out there. And to me, it's one tool in the public safety toolbox, much like design of our roads. I appreciate Washington Boulevard having a median so that people can't go cruising down the middle. I kind of wish we had done that with Nyanza, because people still do that where there is still a turn lane. You'll see people go zooming by that center lane, as I'm sure Captain Johnson has been familiar. That's just one more tool that we can use. And I think it's something that benefits our folks as we move forward. Any other comments from council? Yeah, Councilmember Cruz.
So thank you. I don't know what the outcome of this section is, but I believe it's kind of moving this plan forward with some general guidance to the city to move on with. Are we going to come up with 3, or is it going to be 6? Is it going to be a rotating mobile thing? And so I think that 3 sounds like a good starting piece of a program. I think that anything more than that gets a little bit maybe difficult to kind of figure out where all of them are going to be located. But 3, I think that we can get on board with, here's 3 to start, and then in a year or 2, or we can phase some more to roll in and figure out, are they working well, are they not, lessons learned, and continue to roll them out into other areas. So I think that the stationary rollout of 3 is what I would recommend as next step forwards, and that'd be my recommendation to staff.
Thank you, Councilmember Pearson. I personally would aim for closer to 5 or 6 to start. But again, it's council discretion how we want to move forward. Yes, folks. Councilmember Lindholm.
Yes, please. Thank you. Can you remind me what staff's recommendation is and why?
So we were asked to bring back recommendations from Public Safety Advisory Committee. And then it came to the council direction. And that's kind of where we are in right now. If you were to ask me in terms of traffic enforcement and speed, I'd always say you look at it where accidents are. Because you can put a speed trap up anywhere, but it doesn't that may not do anything to provide that. What I'd recommend hearing the discussion here is we come back with 5 locations. Each location's north, south, east, west. So 10 cameras. But we come back with 5 locations just to narrow it down, narrow the discussion down. If you're asking me, I'd do it based upon safety. Not everyone is going to agree with those 5 locations. That's why I'm expanding it beyond 3, just so council can have that flexibility discussion of where else we'd recommend based on safety. We would talk to law enforcement as well in terms of just looking at data, getting some subjective components, and then council could decide what they want to do with that.
Is there a minimum
Or
threat?
3, 5 more after that, but we would bring back a recommendation for 5 locations based on safety.
Right. Is there a minimum recommendation or minimum threshold to know if this program is viable? Does it give you the stats you need, et cetera, et cetera?
That's a very good question. I think viability depends upon what your definition is of it. In terms of paying for it itself.
So not that, really in terms of can we look in 6, 9, 12 months and know, is this accomplishing what we wanted to accomplish, irrespective of the financials?
Yeah, I'd say what we would do over a period of time in that case is look at it pre versus post implementation, see what it's done for accidents and speed. You know, is it having an impact on the speed going through there? More than likely will. More than likely will probably have an impact, hopefully, on safety in terms of crash data as well. So, you know, it's an interesting question in terms of how many cameras do you need for an effective program, or it's not a standalone. You know, you're going to have reductions in other areas as well. That'd be an interesting thing to study as we do after that. Obviously, the more cameras you'd have, the more of an impact it's going to have broader. You know, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, I've heard of a certain city that has a lot of them, and it's known for having a lot of the cameras, and you go into town, it doesn't matter where you are, you're driving slower. Maybe good, maybe bad. That's just anecdotal. But if you start off a program with 1, you may only have an impact in that very area if that's where people are at.
Well, and you may not know if there's an anecdotal reason for the change in the data. So having 3 or 5.
Yeah, so I think for the discussion standpoint, I'd say, you know, we can come back with 5 locations, again, with both directions. I just know, I mean, people are going to have differences of opinions. It's a very tangible component out there. I mean, you bring up, you know, just examples that infuriate people, the people passing in a turn lane, but it may not have any accidents. But that's immediately where you're going to want to gravitate to. And that's how it is kind of all the way around in terms of it brings up, you know, this location, and we hear it everywhere. You know, it speeds way too fast for my area. We get many emails like that throughout the year. So I think I just got to talk and I forgot what your question was, even Counselor, I'm sorry.
Well, no, that's helpful. So we've heard potential for 3, we've heard potentially an ask for 6. I'd be curious from other council members what their thoughts are, because if you bring back 5, that's not going to meet Councilmember Laura Sella's threshold.
Yeah, Councilmember Brandstatter, go ahead.
I think 3 is a good number. Is a good number to start with. It'll also give us an idea that without how much more staff we're going to need based on the increase in the number of citations that have to be followed, because there is some workload with that to be able to go and do that. And you know, the rate at which we increase them is up to us. But 3 is a good number to learn from, I think.
If I may.
I was going to have Councilmember Talbot
Oh, yes, sir.
speak as well.
Yeah, I mean, initially I was thinking more than fewer, without being, extravagant. I think though that whether it's 3 or 5 or 6 or 10, it's the data is going to tell you what the data is going to tell you. So if they're going to be fixed, because these cameras are usually on a 5-year lease, right? So if they're going to be fixed for 5 years, then hopefully at best in years 1 and 2, you see your citations go down. But if after year 3 and 4 and 5, the number of citations doesn't change, then to me that tells us that the fixed, that leaving the cameras fixed without rotating them is not advancing what we're trying to do in safety.
Thank you, Councilmember Talbot. Councilmember Lindholm.
Thank you. I would just request, given what we've heard, that you bring back 6 locations and we can narrow it down to 3 if that's what the council wants.
And so, thank you, Councilmember Lindholm. My thoughts are certainly come back with a larger number, knowing that we'll then coalesce onto a smaller one, whether it's coming back with 6 to get to 5 or less, or 8 to get to 6 or less. When I looked at the speed data, there were cutoffs at 5 and 8 in terms of the weightings for just speed related. I think as you come up with your recommendations, I would consider weightings for speed, for accident volume, for pedestrian volume, and for youth volume at those locations. And I think we probably can get a general idea of how many pedestrians we have and how much youth we have close to certain schools. Certainly high schools have more people than elementary schools. And I think putting weightings to those gives us a data-driven source to decide how we want to move forward. Certainly public input's important. We have the PSAC. They've said what they think we should focus on. And as council members, we hear from the community about what we should focus on too. So that's the eyeball test that we can apply to this after we have all that data. Yes, Councilmember Pearson.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I would just expand on the whatever this metric is going to be that weights these different things. I like the idea of youth, and I would even kind of expand that a bit and just say, vulnerable people, whether it's youth or seniors or, whatever it's going to be. I like the crash data. And then the only other one that I would really also add is like the potential for conflict density. So areas that have particularly high levels of driveway approaches out onto arterials and intersections and things like that to me, those are, as you're driving 40 miles an hour down an arterial and there's, 5 approaches on each side and there's a lot of potential for accidents. So that to me would be one extra element if that, if that's even possible to kind of at least guesstimate, or something, but.
Would that conceivably be tied to the existing crash data? Or at least
crash data to me is different. I mean, it could be connected, but it could be separate. I mean, you could have a lot of crash data on Silicon out in front of, but you also have 1 million ADT. So that makes sense that there's a lot of crash data, but there's 0 driveway approaches and 2 intersections. So that's the other element that I would say.
Here's what I'd suggest. We identify the 6 locations based on the data, and then we do a narrative around those locations of what's there. Is there a school there? Is there a park there? What school? What's the level of it? I appreciate the desire for weighting it, but we have 7 people on this board. You're not going to agree with the ratings we bring back and the weightings of it.
That's fair, yeah.
But if we put down the exact things you're talking about, it's in the downtown, it's on a rural, less traffic, how close are, cross street type things, we can give a narrative around each of those locations to build a better picture that it could lead to the discussion. And then through that process, council can go with where they want, can bring back 6 locations with some of those qualities that have been identified tonight and how they fit into those locations, and then where council wants to go with it.
I appreciate that kind of a keep it simple mentality. Thank you.
That works. All right, any other comments on this? Otherwise, I would just appreciate if my fellow council members might take a look at what I provided in terms of weighting just for speed and a ranking based on that on the top page. The other piece I had as a recommendation was that this be revisited annually with the data to make changes. One question I thought of as it was brought up by Councilmember Talbot, as we implement a program like this, are we locked into a 5-year contract with a number of locations, or can that be changed on an annual basis?
Members of the council, we'll bring that information back to you, but I would say there's typically always a way to get out of a contract. It just may not be a way that we're very happy with. So, I mean, if we got to that point, we can probably figure out a path forward.
Sounds good. I'm guessing we probably can't use program revenues to get out of a contract.
No, I don't think they would want to see that happen.
Thank you. All right, that is the end of our regular items for discussion. So next we will go to the city manager for updates. City Manager Russell.
Yes, Chair and Council, just a few things really quick. Tomorrow night, Oak Brook Neighborhood Association meeting. And then next week is Desserts on the Driveway in Oak Brook on the Tuesday nights. We also have a grand opening ribbon cutting at Kendrick Landing Apartments this Thursday. And then the only thing trying to wrap around is setting up a date for legislative agenda. I'd put out an email listing that Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, 18th, 19th, and 20th. Just trying to get idea from feedback I've gotten. It looks like Wednesday is the most amenable among this 5, but just trying to confirm because I think someone had conflict on Thursday, someone had a conflict on a Tuesday, if I remember right. Still don't have the mayor or deputy mayor's input in there, but if we shoot for Wednesday, is that generally acceptable?
Just to make the process impossible, I have a conflict for Wednesday. I'm sorry, Doug.
Did we have someone with a conflict on Tuesday?
I have a conflict on Tuesday.
Okay.
But if need be, I can adjust accordingly to make this a priority.
Okay.
So if it works for everyone else, I'll.
Other people's thoughts on Tuesday?
I'm fine with Tuesday.
I'm okay with Tuesday.
Would it make sense to consider a daytime option? Would that be easier? Yeah.
Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesday.
It works for me.
Tuesday.
I will reach out to the mayor and deputy mayor, see if we can confirm that. If we can't get that Tuesday, the 18th at 6 p.m., I will probably try and find some additional dates. Shoot out. Thank you, everyone. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Next, we will go to city council comments, and I will start with Councilmember Pearson.
Thank you. Let's see, this week, I'm gonna try to go to the Kendrick Landing groundbreaking there or the grand opening rather. And then later that day, I've got the sewer general plan review committee. So I think this is our hopefully last meeting. We might have one more, but this is kind of the last working meeting. On Friday, I have the MBA ride around the county and go check out, what works and what doesn't work for the folks building homes and housing in our communities. Tomorrow, I do have a conflict for the Oak Brook Neighborhood Association, so I'm hoping someone can bail me out. If anyone is available to or plans on attending the neighborhood association there. I appreciate that.
I usually like to attend those meetings, so.
Okay, I appreciate that. And also on Thursday, I have PSRC, so busy Thursday, busy week. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pearson. Next, I will go to Councilmember Lindholm.
Thank you, Councilmember Lauricella. Lots going on this week. I'll just say I appreciate the conversation tonight. I appreciate that we're trying to weigh all these many things. Our poor city manager doing yeoman's work. No, looking forward to the weekend. Thank you.
Next, Councilmember Brandstatter.
Tomorrow I'm going to be attending the county's Aging and Disability Resource Advisory Committee meeting. It has to do with a couple of months ago, got a invitation where they were trying to recruit someone from Council District 6 to be on that, and I told them I didn't know much about it, but that I wanted to attend the meeting before I would commit to saying that I was willing to engage in that, although those are two groups of people in the city that should be concerned and want to make sure that the county resources are doing for them well. On Thursday, I plan to attend the grand opening of the Kendrick Landing Apartments that they're having, and because I'm interested in seeing, because it's the first project that was of significant number, but that was built as 100% affordable, but done by a developer, not with relatively little public funding to be able to go and do that. And on Friday, there's an elective leadership group that relates to the unified approach for homelessness that's going on, and so I'm going to go to that, and then they'll be passing on that we intend to vote on August 3rd around the resolution that's there, but they're planning on rolling out some modifications to their long-term plan, with the idea of trying to get towards what should really be in an ILA. So I'll be able to report back to that when we have our first meeting in August, to be able to go and do that. And that's all I have, Mr. Sister.
Thank you, Councilmember Brandstatter. Councilmember Talbot.
Thank you, Councilmember. Tomorrow, okay, so tomorrow I'll be at Oak Brook. And then Thursday, I also plan to attend the Kendrick Landing Apartments. I won't be able to stay for the entirety, but I will be there. And then also later that evening, attend the APCC 16th Annual Smoke Community Banquet. And unfortunately, Friday, it looks like our tour of St. Vincent de Paul Resource Center got canceled, but I was hoping that we could work. I guess we'll work with Brianna to get that rescheduled, because I would like to take advantage of their offer for that tour. So, and then that's my report for this week. As far as tonight's comments, having been absent previously in July, I missed out on some discussion that may have been had about the Custer Road Bridgeport to 75th project. My takeaways and my suggestions, if I can offer any on this project, are that it would be good to post directly link the project. It appears that there is a project webpage, but it's a little bit indirectly linked on the website. It would be good to, I would like to see it linked to the road project site a little bit more directly, so that it's more accessible and prominent. It looks like you have to kind of click to get to the information that you need about the detours. So I would also like to ask if council could get a copy of the contractor schedule, and even that we consider posting the contractor schedule online. That's not an uncommon practice for projects. And I think, considering that we have not a whole lot of experience recently of fully closing down business corridors. I think that we owe it to our businesses to be transparent in our in what is planned out there for the corridor. So I would ask if we at least the council could get a copy of that. I do want to thank staff and city manager and our economic development department for at least starting the business showcase for those affected businesses. Recently, I don't know if we've seen, but there has been postings on Facebook about the newest business to join that corridor, and that's the Bean Water Coffee Shop. And, you know, they just opened. And so I don't know how aware they are of this project, but I would like to see the city connect with them as soon as possible. And if we can do a, well, actually not if we can, but can we do a business showcase with them to at least recognize, acknowledge them, welcome them to the city as our newest business, and you know, provide an environment for them that allows them to have some space to be known. And then as far as the Dower Road, the Custer Road project from Dower to Bridgeport, we did get a lot of mail on that project. We did get a lot of mail from leaders and also residents in the community. I would like to see at some point us develop a web page, at least just for information and transparency, to show at least a timeline of the project so that folks can understand what the scope of the project is, so that they don't have to dial back into YouTube videos of council talking about the project, but that it's just there and accessible, and there's either a graphic or a list of bullet points and a timeline, and then also that they understand when the project will start. I think that those small nuances of communication that we provide helps us get ahead of and also continue to build trust and maintain what trust we can with our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Talbot. I will echo some pieces of that, but I'll start with saying communications has looked a lot better lately in regards to the Custer Road project businesses. I appreciate the business showcase, and I think it's really good that we're able to sort of show some care for the folks who are being impacted by the work that's being done. Following up on Councilmember Talbot's request for contractor schedules, I'm in favor of that as well. I think it's all public record, and I think we can lean into that to show the transparency to our community of what we're working on and when things are planned to be done. But part of that, I think, is going to require additional resources for our communications staff with Public Works. And as we get into our budget session and work through our priorities in there, that'll have to be something that we put some weight to, in addition to everything else we want to accomplish for the city, because nothing comes for free. So we have to figure out how we prioritize things and then how we pay for them. In response to some of the public comments tonight, first, why participate? I think it's really important that the public has a voice here, and we hear them, and we listen, and we weigh what's brought forward, and we use that to drive our communications with staff and with each other and our priorities. So the feedback is rarely positive, but every once in a while, something positive comes out of there, like recognizing that Edgewater Park was cleaned up a little bit. That was nice to hear, right? And whether that was a reflection of our hardworking city staff or the community reaching out to clean it up, either way, it's a positive thing, and I will latch on to anything positive I can get out of our public comments. To that end, I think climate change is a priority for our council, not just because the state says we have to, but because we want to recognize the need to keep our community safe and protect our trees. That's why we launched our NECC program. We've got our task forces, and we have an urban forestry program that we're leaning into. We have clearly made it a priority, even if not all of the vocal residents recognize that. In regards to illegal parking in public spaces or other issues, there's a reason we have a Lakewood 311 app that people can use for that. Within that app, there's a link to the non-emergency line that will get you an even faster response. That goes to South Sound 911, who then routes it to our police department for action. My wife used it last week because there were folks illegally parked along Hilltop Lane, which is a very skinny road that when a vehicle is parked there, there wasn't room for the garbage trucks to get in and out to do their work, or for emergency vehicles if fire department had to get down there. So it was reported to the non-emergency line. Within an hour, Lakewood PD rolled by, looked at the vehicle. They left. I didn't see any action from Lakewood PD, but within 5 minutes, the owner of the vehicle was in the vehicle and left. So shout out to the system for working as it's intended, and to our Lakewood police officers for being responsive, not just to a council member, but someone with a different name. So yeah, beyond that, Edgewater Park, I don't recall in our plan or our master plan, are we looking at a Portland Loo option there? Do we know? Put you on the spot.
I have to look in the planning of it and get back to you.
Yeah, if we're not, that might be a solid option for people who are using that park and need a restroom facility, because we've heard from numerous people of issues with folks going where they shouldn't. And I think that is the end of my topics. Thank you to my fellow council members for indulging me in my first time serving as chair. The gavel is heavy with responsibility, as Councilmember Lindholm and I discussed beforehand, but I appreciate the opportunity. So with nothing else, for the good of the order, I will declare